we're going to take a few things out of order tonight because Steve has to leave and we have a couple of votes that we need to take, and we won't have a quorum if we don't take them up. So one item that we didn't get to was the minutes for a couple of meetings, so I'm taking that off the table. We were reviewing them and didn't finish them. We'll be getting a whole bunch of them in front of this committee shortly. I want to go to number 6, which is approval of payments. You should have all received 2 invoices, one for April and one for May. These were part of the second phase of this, and the council had approved the loan order for this a few weeks back. So can I get a motion on the April payment for AI3? So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The next item is the May service fee from AI3. Can I get a motion to pay the May invoice?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The next item I want to take up is a discussion and vote on the OPM services for the elementary schools. As some of you, or the committee's aware, and some in the audience are aware, we did have a couple of interviews with OPM firms, and at our last meeting a couple of weeks ago, we took a sense of the committee to move forward with Hill as our owner's project manager. So what I'm looking for this evening, in order to continue to move forward with Hill, I'm looking for authorization to negotiate a contract with them as our top choice for representing us.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. I will say that we've had a few conversations already, and we're moving towards getting this done quickly. And they've been having discussions with AI3, so we're moving forward, and thank you both for being here tonight, Vivian and Joe. Thanks. Okay. Review of current design. We're going to Scott now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our presentation tonight is not particularly lengthy, so we wanted to make sure we saw that some other agenda items in the high school, so we want to make sure that we didn't take up too much time. But it's primarily an update on what we've been up to as part of design development, and just to paint a slightly broader picture around schedule. Subsequent to the committee's approval of schematic design in January, I believe it was the January 28th meeting, we moved into design development phase. So about 16 weeks now, we've been working on design development. And as a reminder, our current schedule goal is to complete 100% design development package by the end of July. And at that point in time, that package would be submitted to the building committee. It would be submitted to your owner's project manager for review. It would be submitted to the cost estimators to do an updated and detailed set of cost estimates. So that's the major milestone we're working towards. And tonight, we're going to give you a sense. In the past, we've commented a number of times about the drawings we present are more presentation drawings. Tonight, we're going to give you a little bit more of a sense regarding what's going into the design development package and what those drawings will look like, and as part of our presentation. But first, we have, and I should have mentioned tonight, just as a reminder, I know you guys know everybody from our office. Alex Eving is here, Julie Rahili is here, Mike Ramondi is here. But also tonight, we have from our landscape architecture consultant, Traverse Landscape, we have Chris Bradner here tonight. Okay. And we asked Chris to come, and just by way of explanation, our landscape architect consultant, and we've worked with Traverse for, I don't even know how many years, a long time. Well, I'll show Chris's age, which she wouldn't want me to do. So, but we've worked with them for a long time. They're responsible for all site-related components. So all of the design associated with playgrounds, parking, drives, sidewalks, trees, play fields, everything. We collaborate with them on that design effort. And early on even in the conceptual and schematic design process, we had a number of public members and then some citizens groups come forward and express their concern about making sure that we were conscious of the sensitive nature of a lot of the trees on the sites. And we said at that point in time that we weren't to that point in the project yet, but certainly when the time came, we would begin the process of evaluating the trees on the site, making sure that we introduced strategies to protect them, et cetera, et cetera. And Chris has been doing some of that early work. And so first tonight, we wanted to talk to the committee a little bit about her explorations and what she's been up to, not because there's any decision that has to be made, but just to demonstrate to the public and to the committee the efforts that are underway in that regard. So we've got a few slides at the first part of the presentation with regard to those things. I'm going to have you sit beside me, if you don't mind, and we'll just walk through them. I'm actually going to ask Chris, because I don't want to steal any of her thunder, to just sort of talk about the process, talk about what she's been up to, and explain these first few slides with regard to tree assessment on the sites.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here. I've been working on the 3 schools for over a year now. I've been to each of the sites several times, both with the design team, meeting some of the staff members, the garden coordinator, and also did a thorough walkthrough with Chris Hayward, your tree warden. So that was the most recent site visit we made, and we came up with these diagrams from that meeting to really understand what trees are going to be impacted by construction, and really start to hone in on which trees would need to be removed versus which trees could be and would be protected. And then a handful of trees at each site that have the potential to be transplanted. So in this first diagram, we show that. Red is removal, green is protect, and the purple is possible transplant. We would be walking through each site again with Chris Hayward to really hone in on the condition of the trees that we would be interested in transplanting, and that would be something that the city would get involved with, or the town, and move the trees for transplanting ahead of time, ahead of construction, either to another site or somewhere on this, either to another site temporarily or permanently, or to another location on the site permanently if we can. We just don't want to, we definitely don't want to move trees twice, but in some instances where construction is tight, we would consider that.
And the next slide, I think, is essentially the same thing, but it just gives you a better idea of the building location and why some of the trees would have to be removed as part of the project. Chris, you want to?
Sure. These are all drawn to a scale showing the true drip lines of the trees using Google mapping that's accurately and geolocated to the sites. So this shows the proposed building, and it shows, again, the trees to be removed in red, and it's obvious why they're either falling, in the proposed building location or roadway location. And in some instances, there would be significant grading around the trees. But the trees that we would look to protect would have tree protection, fencing, chain link, very stringent specifications as far as protection, and it would be at the drip line of the trees.
We're going to
chain link?
review them by school, so if there are any questions associated specifically with the Hosmer, we're happy to address those before we go on to the other schools.
Okay, questions on the trees from Steve?
You said chain link fence protection?
6-foot chain link construction fence around the drip line of trees to be protected, usually in a large group of trees, so we can capture a whole. In this instance, if you look along, what is this? What is this street here? That's Chauncey. Along Chauncey.
Yeah.
There's a large swath of trees right in a row along Chauncey. We would want to have the chain link fence running along the drip line along the entire area, so all of the lawn area would be protected.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Any questions from the audience? Yes. Please come to the microphone, sorry.
Hi, Anne Marie Clonan, Winthrop Street. So the trees with the basketball court, the line where I see the white line up further, closer to this end, Scott,
I'm sorry.
towards me more.
Uh,
Beginning of the basketball court on Hosmer,
Existing basketball court.
right? Keep going. There's a white line right there, if I
Oh,
see
yeah.
correctly.
This part?
So there are a line of trees there, which I know that there's been a back and forth about whose property line those are on. And I see that the white line is going across those trees. Those are some pretty big old trees.
Yep.
What was the assessment on those? I don't see.
So the trees, the trunks kind of fall right on the property line, like
Yep.
before or after, there might be a chain link fence there.
Yes.
What we're showing there is the drip line of the tree, meaning the canopy that's shading over the existing parking lot. So that's the dashed line that's kind of cloud-like. And then the property line is really where like the center of the trunks of the trees. We don't plan on removing any of those trees.
So those are blue, right? Oh, no. Those
They're
are-
they're off-site
fine.
trees, so we don't give
Okay.
them a color because we're not going to be.
Just wanted to
messing
make
with
sure
them.
because I saw the line going through it and no acknowledgement. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions, Peter?
Thank you. Just a quick comment. Those trees to the right, to the far right, the one that's a red, that's in tough shape. And, you know, I understand that those two other trees are probably healthy, but in terms of functionality, it's not going to work with the field there. So I don't know how you're going to work it, trim them back or so on and so forth. Just a comment.
The tree warden is well aware, and he's done some tree trimming the last time we were out there. And that last tree that is shown in red, he does agree it's in rough shape.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Scott.
So this is Cuniff, and this is a little easier of a site. Most of the trees are around the perimeter. The trees along the front, along Warren Avenue, we're really investigating how we're transitioning the new entrance from Warren up to the new front entrance of the school, and we're trying to preserve those trees along the front as much as possible, with the exception of the one that's shown in red, which is a pine tree that's very close to the construction of the new building. And a few transplants that we're working through with the tree warden.
Any
Questions on,
relatively light impact there. Any questions related to those?
questions on the Cuniff? Anyone from the audience on the trees at the Cuniff? Continue on to the Lowell.
And Lowell is similar in the construction of the new wing, impact that corner of the site, which includes the trees in red. There are no plans for a transplant. The only extra note I'd add to this one is the three trees along the, I would say, historic front of Lowell are going to be assessed in greater detail by the tree warden to determine the health of the trees. One thing we don't want to do is go through all these protection measures with heavy construction happening around these trees, only to find out that later on they've, were in poor condition to start with. So he's doing a full assessment, and we'll be getting his results back to the design team so we can make a full determination on those.
Any questions specific to Lowell? It's fairly straightforward also in that as a result of doing the addition, the primary addition in that location, it's just impacting the trees there.
It's good to see that, I know we don't like to see trees removed, but we're not removing that many trees. So I think I appreciate, and I'm sure many people will appreciate that.
I would point out that with all three of the renovation addition schemes, including the one at Lowell that involved more addition, the impacts would have been significantly more. So we're pleased as well.
Thank you.
I think that's it.
Okay.
I think. We're in the process of getting more detailed topographical information, and particularly utility information, on all three of the sites. The surveyors are literally working on that and compiling that for us, and we hope to have that in just a few weeks. But one of the things that's happening during design development is all of the drawings that we'd previously shown in schematic design, which were a little more loose, a little more conceptual, now get very real in that we have to very definitively define the building parameters, every sidewalk, every elevation change on the site. And one of the things that we're doing now as part of the site engineering at the Hosmer, we've got a building that we clearly want to keep all at one level. It's very awkward to make a transition inside a building. It feels like a renovation addition if you have ramping and stairs and complex transition, elevation transitions in the building. So we've always known we want to keep the Hosmer, the new Cuniff building at the same elevation. But that means we've got to find a balance between the elevation on this side of the site, where we've got the roadway coming through and we've got the primary building entries, and the elevation on this side of the site. And you can see that there is a difference. Interestingly enough, you can see the elevation grade along this side of the site at approximately 73 to 69, and then where we've got the K-5 entry and where we've got the preschool, pre-K, early childhood learning center entry, we're down in the 65 to sort of 68 range if you come all the way out to Concord Road. So when we set the elevation, the primary portion of the building which will drive where we want to set the elevation or the height of that first floor will be driven by making sure that these primary entry points on this side of the building are at the appropriate elevation to be able to transition from the drive to a curb to plaza areas and come inside the building. And once we know exactly what that elevation is, then we can determine how much we have to change the grade or the elevations in the service area. And we're working on that, but the reason we bring it up is because there's been a lot of discussion around exactly how we would redesign this service area to make it work for the school, make it work for the visitors coming in, this public access point at the dining area, and the ability to come in that dining access and go over to the gymnasium. And so we want to just apprise the committee of some of our activities there. And it appears to us now that we're getting more detailed grading information that the most beneficial approach for the project would be if we don't necessarily just accept all of the construction and design that was done when the two buildings were separated, because it really was very much ad hoc in that it appears that they just did the simplest, least expensive thing. And so this is the construction project of the new school, certainly an opportunity to try to make everything right back here. And as an example, you know, they've got some elevation up high with railings, they've got some elevation down low, they've got retaining walls and slopes down to their service area. This happens to be the service area at the Brigham House. And it really constricts the area a lot. You can see it best in this photo where we've got stairs coming down to a lower level here, and then a curb up, and then the service access, and the ramp going up. And in trying to create an ideal service area for both the school and the Brigham House, it's obvious to us that a redesign and utilization of this entire area is appropriate. Now, we're going to have to take some steps to explore what's possible, because there's a lease line that comes through here where the Brigham House is leasing some of the property from the town. Town owns all of this property, but the Brigham House has a lease, and we're going to be exploring that through if it's appropriate through the building committee chair, we'll find the appropriate contacts within the town and explore that further. But we just want you to know that we're taking a more global look at trying to do the right thing in this entire area. And we'll have some proposed layouts. We were fairly close, but we decided not to get into them tonight because we'd like to do a little bit more evaluation. But we're looking at various options for this area that get a lot more detailed than the prior conceptual options that we were showing. But we will be continuing to investigate that.
If I may, I think this is a good approach at this point to look at that, and I think Steve and his office could help with the details with the Brigham House. I mean, this is the time to do it. We're there. Why would we do a half of the job? So, as you said, we do own the property. We do have a lease, but we still have some potential things that we can do. So, thank you, and I think Steve would be the appropriate contact for that. Thanks,
Perfect.
Steve.
Perfect. The other thing that we'll be coordinating with both the owner's project manager and Lori on, and have already begun some communication with Lori on, in that we know this is going to be happening, is that this summer is going to be the ideal opportunity to complete the additional geotechnical investigations that need to occur on the site. And so, for example, this is obviously the Hosmer site. This is approximately the area that the building takes up. What we're showing on this drawing is the Phase 1 borings, the ones we conducted some time ago on the site to get a sense of the subsurface conditions there. And so those are in black. So this B4, B9, B6, B8, B7, any of the numbers in black represent a location where a boring has already been taken. And at the time that the Phase 1 work was done, you might ask, why did you do a boring way out here? As a reminder, at the time that the Phase 1 work was being done, there was a possibility we would be constructing an addition in this area. So we were exploring a variety of different areas with that first phase of borings. This summer, we'll be extending that exploration to include additional borings, and the red locations represent the borings that will be done this summer. And you can see they more accurately define the perimeter of the proposed new building, so that we can just make certain that we've got data in those locations as well. So if you see activities at the site this summer, you'll know what they're up to. There'll be a drilling rig on the site for a few days, obviously coordinating to make sure those activities are safe and are as cause as little impact as possible. But just want to make you aware that that's what's going on.
Question from Paul.
Yeah.
Scott, have we located the old Winthrop Street? Is it still serviced under the, it used to continue straight through,
Right through here, you mean?
right? Yeah.
Have we located?
Are there
it-
services under there that we need to, that will be in our way and potentially be an added cost as we go into construction?
We met with DPW recently to talk specifically about utility information on the site. Their biggest concern was a large water main that used to come right down through here when this road came through. I'm sure you'll recall when that road came through. There's apparently a large water main that comes down through that area. We don't have from the surveyors the final utility information yet, so it's not overlaid on our survey work yet, but when we do have that, we'll know where we have to be cautious about utilities.
Okay.
They did not mention that there were utilities that extended through Winthrop, but it'll show up on the utility survey work.
Yeah, my memory is there's some hydrant lines that run through there, and that's an old memory, so take it for what it's worth.
Okay. We'll have a chance to confirm that very soon.
Okay.
There are a variety of different architectural drawings, and again, this is to give you a sense of where we are with the design development set of drawings, the drawing set that will be completed at the end of July. And each one of these is an actual full-size architectural drawing from our current set, just to give you a sense of what we're up to. This one in particular, you'll recognize as the first floor plan, and the reason we have it in here is not only to show you the additional detail that gets incorporated into the floor plans during this phase of the design, but also we want to talk just a little bit about the public entries and the building committee's questions surrounding how we're going to secure the building and how we're going to allow the public after hours into portions of the building, but be able to secure other portions of the building. So we said when you posed those questions that we had strategies for that we would be employing. So we just want to show a few of those. We've talked about this entry, for example, being a public entry for gymnasium use. If there's nighttime use of the gymnasium and you wanted to allow access from Concord Road, this would be an excellent candidate for that because it allows somebody to come through a double-door vestibule, come into an area which will essentially act as a lobby and go directly into the gymnasium. And then as a reminder, we have toilets directly off of that gymnasium, so once they're into that space, they don't necessarily have to get to any other portions of the building. And in this particular area, we'll be introducing not fire doors, but security doors, you can see them here, that are oversized doors. So that pair will be about 8 feet wide, about 4 feet for each leaf, and about 9 feet tall. So they're so large that when they're open, they still allow that corridor and that opening to feel completely open. And we'll pocket them so that they fold into the walls and basically disappear during the school day. So when the building's used, typically during the school day, this will just seem like a hallway that narrows ever so slightly in that location, but still has a very tall vertical opening, very wide opening. And then if this area was going to be used at night, the only thing necessary is to release those doors, then they're locked from this side. Someone can still get out of them. We have to allow that for egress by pushing panic hardware on this side, but essentially it locks down this vestibule. Another pair just like them here. Again, open during the majority of the day, but able to be closed at night for community use. So this essentially only allows someone into this lobby space and into the gym. Now you might say, what if they take off up the stairs? They can't go anywhere because when we get to the second floor, you'll see the same condition. So they can go up the stair, but they can't get into any portion of the building. We still got the ability to secure that entire area and not let them any further. These doors can be closed, these doors can be closed, these doors can be closed, and they can't get beyond that point. And the same is true on the third floor.
Scott, 1 second.
Yes.
Laurie?
I know we're still early in this, but as we, later on, when we think about alarm systems too, can we make sure that those tie to where the doors are so that we're alarming the right areas?
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be absolutely be part of it. I want to point out while we're on the first floor, that same condition will exist at the dining area. For example, this is also a public after-hours entry with a vestibule. So if someone comes in from the north side of the school, comes into this lobby area, and we consider this hallway and this hallway part of that lobby area, they can go into the dining area, but they can't get any further in this direction. They can go into the gymnasium, assuming these doors are open, but if you wanted them to only be able to get into the dining area, they would not be able to get into the gymnasium. But it allows you to secure this vestibule. It allows you to keep these doors open and allow anybody to go from this vestibule into the dining area or into the gymnasium, but not get into the remainder of the school. Any questions, Chip?
John?
Just a quick one back on the gymnasium. So there is no, like, changing room for students or anybody else? And is that, I don't see one, so is that typical for an elementary school? You usually don't?
It is.
You usually don't include one?
Typical at an elementary school that you wouldn't have that kind of space.
Are we designing the doors and hardware for intrusion, active shooter type thinking, where is there going to be a panic button and we lock
Yes.
down floor by floor?
When we get to a discussion of particularly classroom hardware, we'll be talking about the lockdown mechanisms and strategy, and we'll probably at that point in time want to either establish the individuals on the town side that we would be talking with regard to that, or establish a subcommittee of this building committee to specifically talk about that. We wouldn't probably talk too much about that in the open public session for the building committee, just because in many instances, we want to sort of keep relatively secret the strategies we're utilizing for student safety, but we definitely would be doing that, Paul, and talking
You
through
will be
that.
designing
Yep.
for that going forward, great.
One quick question, and maybe this is getting too into the weeds at this point, but maybe something to think about. I like the design for securing those two areas for public meetings. One of the things that would concern me is if we had, a community meeting in the lunchroom, I can imagine people coming to the front of the building, finding a locked door and, not necessarily paying attention to what entrance they're going to. So I'm not sure if you've thought at all about wayfinding or some way to identify that if you're, going to the public space of the building, it's around that side or something.
We certainly have done that with signage in creative ways in the past, and we may want to consider if there's, and we haven't talked at all about signage and wayfinding, but when we get to that point, we may want to talk about how many different entrances we want to prepare to direct visitors from.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would also point out that we have said in the past that this might be a community space. You still have the opportunity to open that up as a community space in that we still have the academic wing secured here, so nobody can go any further in that direction, and the academic wing secured here. So if you wanted to open up all this entire area, you could do that as part of community use. Second floor, primarily, we wanted to point out the security points we're placing in the floor plan. But again, this also demonstrates the level of detail. We now have a complete structural grid. We've got structural documents. We're not showing them in the set tonight, but the design development set will have structural documents in it. Third floor. You'll recognize all the floor plan. I know you're very familiar with the floor plan, but you've just never seen it. Building committee's never had an opportunity to see it in the form of a detailed design development drawing. We're developing all of the exterior elevations in detail, almost finished with those. They're representative of the renderings that the building committee has supported, but we've got to delineate those very specifically. One of the goals of the design development set is to allow an incredibly accurate cost estimate to be produced. So we want to make sure that we're accurate, very accurate with every aspect of the building.
Scott, can you hang up
Yes.
for 1 second? John had a question.
Yeah.
Back on the third.
I'm sorry, back on the floor plans, just real quick for a second. Just basically in any two classrooms, could you describe what the wall is? Is it solid between them, or is there a door between some of them? And then there's also this, which I'm not quite sure what it is, kind of a dotted line square on each of them?
Right.
Yeah, what is that?
Sure. And we'll be, at some point in time, we'll be doing presentations on the classroom where we give you some three-dimensional views on the classroom to better understand what those are. But in programming them through design development, there are a handful of elements that the faculty, staff, and administration provided to us as their programmatic needs for classrooms. So I'll just point out some of those. Essentially, a typical elementary school classroom has a couple of zones, and this is not unusual, and it's the way that your staff and administration utilize the classroom now. The zone on this side of the classroom is more of a student-centered zone where they like to reserve an area for soft surface. Now they're utilizing a rug. Likely it'll be a similar strategy for this building. So that's representing a clear area where in each classroom we want to maintain a soft surface where the students can be seated for reading, for instruction, to do some of their own presentation work. On that particular wall, all of the marker board space, the whiteboard space, comes down much closer to the floor because it's student-friendly. They want them to literally be able to just go right over to it and it be more of their height. So those are representative of the student zone, although we would suggest that this entire classroom is intended to be very flexible in terms of layout. And then this side of the classroom is more I hate to use the word traditional, but it's more technology-driven in that this is where LCD projection or interactive whiteboard, smartboard technology would be introduced, and it would be more of the instructional wall for the facilitator or teacher. And then this zone of the building is the wet zone in that it would have sink, combination sink and bubbler, and some storage area in that zone. This area is a sort of a huddle zone for individual students or one or two students, where it creates a nook for a student or a couple of students who are reading independently but are inside the classroom to come and be able to do that somewhat separated from the rest of the room. And then everywhere that you see a little line across the classroom here, even down through here, even along these walls and on this exterior wall, it's incorporating some low storage shelving. In all of the elementary school classrooms, there's a significant need for open storage along the perimeter of the classroom. So in the design development drawings, we've incorporated those needs for the classroom area. This is always a solid wall. We haven't, in reviewing with the staff and administration, there's not a desire to make that a movable wall between the classrooms. And movable walls, we haven't talked about them much with the building committee, but movable walls sound like a good idea, but having done this for 30 years and going back to the schools later, 99% of the time we see that the movable wall has never been moved. And they present some other challenges in that we can't do built-in electrical on them. We can't do really good whiteboard surfaces on them. They slightly compromise our acoustical rating. So, and the staff and administration seems strongly to feel that the walls between the classrooms will be permanent. Sometimes there's conversation around a communicating door between the classrooms. We haven't gotten to a detailed discussion on that. We generally discourage it because it compromises acoustics. No matter what we do to the door, it compromises acoustics. But I would say we're not far enough along in programming to know if that may or may not introduce itself. A lot of times we don't see that decision made until early sort of construction document phase. Sorry, John, that was a long answer, but did I get all of your
Yeah,
questions?
no, that's fine. The other quick comment, it's interesting, and this may be what they want, the small group rooms, so there's like several of them that are kind of between rooms, right, the classrooms. I think they're labeled small group, is that right? Yeah.
Right.
So those open out onto the hallway as opposed to into the room.
They do. There's been
Your preference?
Sure, preference, because in order to make those as flexible as they can possibly be, the instructional program includes a lot of support, instructional support to students who are being pulled out of the classroom, but they want to keep them as close to the classroom as possible. And so, and those rooms are also being utilized a lot for students who may not even be associated with that classroom. Like a lot of times there's a need to pull out a student. And so in the end, the staff thus far has been very much in support of some transparency into the classroom. Like there happens to be a window here with the ability to obscure that or shade that window, but that the entrance would be from this side. We've talked about possibly doing entrance from here, here, and here, but we explained that there would certainly be some acoustic compromise and some loss of wall space. So I would say that's an ongoing discussion, and this is the current status based on our programming discussions.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
More exterior elevations. The design development set will have building sections, so you're seeing here literally slices through the building that start to show the structure, start to show all of the interior finishes in sufficient detail that, as I said earlier, the cost estimator will know exactly what's being proposed. This happens to be the theater-style seating in that learning commons area coming up from the first floor. Here we're out in the outdoor learning area looking at an exterior wall surface, and there we've cut through into the inside of the building. This is a little confusing because these are beginnings of our wall section sheets, and they're turned 90 degrees to your view so that we can show the entire wall section, but this is a vertical exterior wall section cut through the building. In the design development set, in the final design development set, these will all be noted with materials, dimensions, et cetera, so the cost estimators have a good sense of that. We'll have all of the exterior windows, both in the form of storefront, which is a large section of window, or curtain wall, which is an even larger section of window, and smaller windows, clearly delineated so the cost estimators can get a sense of that. We'll have schedules in our set.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Sorry, you're flying through this, so I just have a really quick question.
Yeah.
All right, can we back up to the exterior elevations? Can you just briefly talk about materiality, where you stand right now? Because obviously we're entering DD, so there must be a general idea of where you're at.
We are. We are, and it wasn't my intention to skip over that. We did talk about that a lot when we presented the exterior renderings, but certainly happy, Kelly, to go through that. The primary exterior building material, there are three primary exterior building materials if you exclude glass and glazing. There's a natural stone material that will likely be a thin set stone, but we're utilizing it on the base in some areas. So when you see that 3 feet plus or minus height at the base in a lot of these areas, that's that natural stone material. And then we're utilizing a metal shingle, a metallic natural metal shingle in a number of locations. So anywhere you see the cross hatching, like right here, right in here, over the top here, that's the metal shingle finish that you would have seen in the renderings that we presented. And then anytime you see the very narrow horizontal linear lines, that's the composite material that looks like wood, like horizontal tongue and groove wood that appeared in the renderings. And so you see that here. You see some of it here around the metal shingle areas, and then you see it here.
What about the crosshatch above the stone?
That's also metal shingle above the stone.
So when you say natural metal, what are we talking about? Are we talking about copper, zinc?
We're talking, right now we're evaluating whether we think it's best to use metal, like literally metal, or use aluminum. A lot of the products that we're looking at come in both natural finishes, so you can get a brushed metal or a brushed aluminum, or they come in painted finishes, a Kynar finish on those. And in the renderings, we showed them as looking very metallic, slightly reflective, kind of representative of what a stainless steel appliance might look like in terms of its finish. But you can achieve that in both a painted finish shingle with the Kynar paints they have now, and in a natural anodized finish. So we don't know specifically what that would be yet. We're still meeting with vendors and evaluating exactly what product we'd want to specify on that. But the look certainly is very much sort of a brushed stainless metallic look.
So that's the crosshatch.
That is correct.
Okay. And sorry, just because the key is difficult for me to see, the darker tone is what? Wood?
The darker tone is the composite material that looks very much like wood.
See.
And then on elevation 1A, the vertical components, is that structure holding up a canopy?
It is. At the very top of that, it's a brace that we've introduced for that roof projection. We haven't confirmed with the structural engineer if we're literally going to make that truly structural or if it's going to be more aesthetic, but that's correct. That's what it is.
And so that's kind of an exterior strut.
If you guys don't mind, please raise your hand so we're not all, thank you. Leo.
So that's an exterior strut look?
It is from this point up to that roof edge, Leo. And this represents a recess in that exterior surface, and then the same thing, the same strut projected out to this projected canopy down low.
Continue.
Scott, could you comment briefly on the general language of this facade and also the hierarchy that you're trying to achieve? Like, what spaces are more significant than others? Can you read that from the outside? And how are you treating the facade language?
On that south elevation?
That's an example, yeah, good
Yeah, okay,
example.
on that south elevation. One of the things, and because this is part of the construction drawings, you'll see it's cut off slightly. But on the south elevation, we've talked about trying to balance the massing and make it a relatively symmetrical massing where on this side, we've got the dining area, but in terms of mass, and the roof line is lower than this middle section.
So just hierarchically, that's a subservient space to the others?
To the academic piece, the piece that you see in the middle. And then the same sort of treatment occurs, it's a little out of your view, but on this end of the building, where this academic piece right here, that 3-story academic section in the middle becomes the sort of centralized mass of that facade. And so the treatments are somewhat different in that here, we want it to be clear that these are academic classrooms, and we've set up a grid such that each classroom has 2 of these windows. So you're seeing classroom, 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 and then the last classroom there. And then stair tower, flanking that academic portion. And then we tested a variety of different scenarios on how to express those classrooms, but if we got too literal in expressing them horizontally, it seemed to make this facade become very horizontal in its appearance, and it's already quite horizontal, as you can see. So we've captured the windows above each other, in this case, from the 3rd floor to the 2nd floor, and this portion of this particular classroom, and then this portion separately to emphasize the vertical and to break up that large horizontal facade. But to your original question, certainly we want this central mass to read as the academic section flanked by other support facilities on each end, and then with the stair tower stacked, on each end of that academic area.
Yeah, clearly the academic language in the central portion of that facade is very evident, right? That's very clear. What I'm wrestling with a little bit more is in other precedent projects that I'm aware of, the collection spaces have been seen as the more public and thus more dominant spaces, right? So I'm actually wrestling with the reversal of that in this facade, with the lowering of the eave at the corner, which I think is probably an incredibly prominent corner facing out onto the Hosmer Field. and the introduction of this kind of angled awning condition there. I think in general, I'm going to encourage you to simplify. I mean, clearly the rhythm of the academic bar is there, right? And that's very clear. But I think the corners and the other edge treatments could use some clarification. I'm counting 5 different awning lines on these main facades, and I'm wondering do we need that many, just in general? Or can we start to simplify this a little bit more?
It's certainly possible. We can look at that. The massing has, meaning the three-dimensional massing, provides a little bit more insight into that versus this two-dimensional drawing, but it's certainly something that we could look at. There are obviously efficiencies, both construction-wise and cost-wise, and simplifying some of those roof lines. So we could certainly take a look at that. I would say that in terms of the height of this corner mass, one of the things that we're trying desperately not to do is be any more dominant on this corner with the Brigham House, located literally right here, than we have to be. So it is a little bit of a balance.
Right. So what I'd like to understand is you're purposely bringing that volume lower, but yet you're emphasizing it with this kind of edge hat. So for me, it's either one or the other.
Sure.
Right? So just interested in seeing if this, especially on this northern elevation, same kind of condition. It just feels like the switch between the very regimented verticality of the academic marching along in the windows, all of a sudden switching at the corners to more of like a mid-century prairie-style horizontal orientation on the windows is a little discordant for me. But maybe that's the intent. And I just need to wrap my head around it, maybe.
Sure. I know that you have an architectural eye, so you can read these elevations much better than a non-professional. But one of the things we can certainly do is make those renderings available to you, and that might help you. I'm not suggesting it would necessarily change any of your points, but that might be very helpful in sort of understanding some of that as well.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I guess in general, I'm just feeling like it could be simpler and thus calmer in general. Thank you.
And just one more clarification. I'm seeing the window louvers on the exterior elevations, but not on the wall section. Can you just confirm if those are still in scope?
The sunshades?
Yes.
We're still carrying a quantity of sunshades. We don't know for certain that they'll all be required. But for example, in areas like this, where we're showing them, we are assuming that they will definitely be required. We've just completed the first round of energy modeling on the building, and that modeling will continue to inform exactly where we will need those. But yes, we suspect that we've eliminated a lot of them, because a lot of them, the energy model told us that a lot of them don't really have that much value.
And with the canopy, I didn't know if it was redundant.
Right? Yeah?
Okay.
Continue on.
And again, this is just representative. At the design development stage, we'll have a complete door schedule, every single door in the building, size, materials, configuration, et cetera. This is just representative of that.
Hang on 1 second, Scott. We have, Maureen, did you have a question?
I'm Maureen Foley from Winthrop Street. Scott, with the metal and the composite material, how does that age?
Both,
Does it fade?
sure.
Does it become brown? Does the metal become brown? How does that, and does it need treatment along the way?
The metal, we would stay away from any kind of materials that are anticipated to patina. For example, some people very much like copper or lead-coated zinc, but those change their color, material, look over time. With the proposed shingle, metal shingle that we would utilize, our expectation is that it wouldn't change its look significantly. And those are all products that have the kind of lifespan that we would anticipate for a public building like this. Although we would point out that our goal with the exterior of this building, and it's true of a lot of sort of green, sustainable, net zero buildings, is that we would use very much a sustainable material. So when I talk about the composite wood siding, that is a LEED certified green material with some wood composite in it, that's long-term recyclable. When we talk about metal shingles, for example, there's nothing more recyclable than that, so that you can sort of, if you do ever take it off and replace it, that the materials are green and recyclable. We're trying to create an exterior wall section of exterior materials that are also very easy to remove and replace.
Oh, all right.
And the reason we feel strongly about that is the technology with exterior fenestration or exterior materials in general is changing very rapidly. And for example, 30 years ago, everybody thought it was a great idea to put brick veneer on a building, and that would last forever. And now we see those 30-year-old buildings, and we see they're cracking, they have to be repointed, and if you ever wanted to change that exterior, it'd be an enormous amount of work to try to take all of that brick off and put new brick on. So we are sticking on the exterior with materials and construction techniques that will make the material sort of easily removed and replaced and not overcomplicate the exterior building systems.
I had one more, that's a really good point. When you talked about the elevation at one end of the building is 3 feet different, is there a basement in this building?
No,
So you're on a slab,
on a slab, yeah.
pretty much. Also, I'm hitting all the points. That canopy everybody's talking about? Does that also protect from water coming down on the kids, or what does it do? Or is it just aesthetically?
No, I mean, it serves a handful of purposes. I think certainly it's often utilized as an aesthetic strategy. For us, we also see that it protects that top section of the building, meaning anytime you don't have some protection, and it's done all the time with no projection, but anytime you don't have that, you do have moisture running right down the face, right at the top of the building.
Mm-hmm.
In some instances here, it provides us some shading where we don't have to introduce shades like Kelly was pointing out. So it depends on the area of the building. Sometimes it's aesthetic, sometimes it's shading, and sometimes we are trying to protect the upper section of the
The
wall.
canopy's going to pretty much go all around onto Concord Ave side and the field side. And I really didn't follow Leo's questions at all, but on the back end also by the Brigham House.
Yeah, on the portions that it appears in the elevation, keeping in mind that we think of it as a roof projection, and it's not. It's probably in the range of 3 feet, depending on the specific location on the building. So don't think of it as sort of a very extended projection or canopy that's out really far. I know you said protecting the students. It's not out far enough to protect somebody that's standing outside. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you.
I have a follow-up to one of
Kelly first.
Just going back to the exterior materials, Scott, I guess my only word of caution, I understand with brick masonry, we would have to repoint over time, but you know, in my mind, the life cycle of brick compared to composite is probably greater, and repointing versus full exterior replacement seems, I'm just not sure how to compare those two. So I would say that I have some concerns over the composite. I think it looks great, but I would worry about the wear and tear over the years, because I don't think we're going to have the funds, you know, in 20 years just to build another school or, you know, resurface all of the exterior. Same with the metal. I'm not quite sure what that vision is, but I just want to make sure that we're building a building that looks like it's going to stand the test of time, you know, both architecturally, but just materiality, and just so we're not going to be spending operating costs making repairs for the rest of the duration.
Sure, I think those are fair points. I think that any of the materials that we would propose introducing here, certainly we would expect, you know, a very long lifespan for those materials.
Leo?
So one of the things that you said, Scott, I wanted to touch on, I was intrigued by the idea of some of these eaves as shading devices, right? And so I'd like to know, are you actively studying these facades with solar studies to limit the solar heat gain on the building? Is that how some of these elements are being introduced? And what is your strategy behind shading?
There are two things that we're looking at in terms of what they accomplish. One of which is we are asking, as part of the energy modeling and some daylighting analysis, you know, where they benefit us. But we're also finding that little bit of projection also is going to allow us to extend our platform for photovoltaics in some area where we're likely going to have to introduce guardrail protection because of the extent of the proposed photovoltaics on the building. We're likely going to have to propose installing guardrail protection on the entire perimeter. And so it kind of buys us a little bit of area for photovoltaics. But we are studying its impact on shading and the, you know, solar gain on the building as well. That's, in fact, the current energy model assumes all those projections, and we could evaluate, you know, what the removal of those and what its impact would be. I think that, you know, our decision to remove them or not would be more about kind of function and aesthetics. I don't think from an energy standpoint it's going to be significant in terms of reducing or increasing thermal gain on the building envelope.
Sorry, you don't think that shading devices would make a significant impact on the solar heat gain on the building?
Only in locations where we have windows, but where we already have,
Right.
you know, a typical exterior building envelope.
Yeah, strictly in the areas where windows are.
it
For
do- it
example,
doesn't-
this corner that we're talking about, this focused corner on the south?
In this particular corner?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, as an example, right?
That's an example where we're fairly close to a window, and I can't recall specifically from the modeling whether the window got captured in some of that or not. But there are other areas where, you know, it's not that close to exterior glazing. And in those instances, we've been told that it doesn't make a huge difference in terms of protecting the heat gain on a typical exterior building envelope with no window in it.
Yeah, no, I understand the part about the no window, but at the windows, I would think that it does.
It
make a
does,
significant
it definitely
impact.
does, at the
So
windows.
when you have a double height collection space, as in this corner,
Very helpful.
so there's a certain honesty to using exterior shading devices in ways that they're making an impact on the energy use of the building. And then there's other things that we do to embellish facades, including introductions of secondary and tertiary awnings and other canopy conditions that are all about just architectural choice, right? So I think that in general, the trend is to lean more towards the functional and work those aesthetics in, those functional aspects into the aesthetics. Just a comment. Thanks.
Move on.
A lot of these drawings, again, are just intended, and with apologies to Kelly and Leo, are intended for the non-architectural audience to just understand that in about 4 weeks, I'm sorry, in about 7 weeks, that there's going to be an enormous set of drawings show up, and, don't be surprised by it, because we don't often show this product during, there's not a progress point where we print a set of documents during this phase for submittal or for cost estimating. Typically, we work to the end of design development, do 100% set, and that's the first time you see it. And sometimes it can be a little shocking for the non-architectural, non-OPM folks to see the level and magnitude of drawing. So we're just trying to give you a sense of that. These are all interior, demonstrating building interior through building sections. We are proposing, and you'll see this when we develop presentation renderings, but we are proposing in some areas to expose some of the structure, whether that's a column or a brace or a beam or a girder, in an effort to give kind of an honest understanding to the students of how a building's held up and how the structure works inside the building. So there will be some examples of that. We're also, with this particular building, because we're trying to do a super efficient building and we're trying to reduce the exterior building envelope, we are going to lower floor-to-floor heights than would traditionally be utilizing. We're proposing 12-foot floor-to-floor heights to reduce exterior building envelope and reduce overall building volume. For a number of years, going back maybe 25 years, that was fairly common. Most recently, it seems, at least in our opinion, that architects and engineers have gotten a little bit lazy, and they've increased that floor-to-floor height, so they have lots of room above the ceiling for their ductwork and all of their equipment, and that way they don't have to coordinate it very carefully. But in this age of building information modeling, we've got this entire building in Revit, which is a building information model. We can look at the coordination of all those systems, and we can coordinate them very precisely. And so, in our opinion, we should be making these buildings as efficient as possible in terms of their volume. And so this design in this building is headed in that direction. Some examples of some interior elevations. And again, tonight was not intended to be a design presentation, so I'm moving fairly quickly through these. But if you have any questions at all, we certainly can stop and answer. And we're showing typical interior elevations inside a classroom. And then to John's point earlier, this is just a blown-up classroom where we'll start to show some more detail of exactly what those look like. Typical, this is a large plan of the art room. We're starting to blow up at an increased scale, those areas and the storage in the art classrooms. And generally, we'll be taking, our design development set will obviously be developed based on the programming that we've done with the faculty, staff, and administration, but it also gives us a chance to take that documentation and go back to them for verification and additional discussions on all these spaces. The music areas and enlarged plans of those areas and the storage needs in those areas and the acoustical wall treatments. For example, the pattern that you see here is starting to introduce the necessary acoustical treatments on the walls in the music rooms. More interior elevations. So we're going to show some examples of the same kind of documentation for the CUNF. We would point out, as I mentioned on the Hosmer, that we're now starting to get into very detailed grading and elevations around the perimeter of the building. We've mentioned this in the past, but we're studying how much of this exterior portion of the gymnasium. The gymnasium, as a reminder, is located in this area. We want to utilize this exterior wall of the gym on the lower level to be a retaining wall because it's a much more efficient and effective method of retaining the soil in this area. We tested some scenarios with retaining walls that were pulled back off of the building, but the most efficient way to do it is going to be to make this corner of the gymnasium a retaining wall, and that's why you see the grades coming up against that. And so we're studying how to do that and keep the wide pathways, the 6-foot-plus pathways, coming down into the site and make sure we've got access behind the site and to the receiving area. We're taking a look at exactly clearly delineated parking spaces now and the space required for that, making sure we've got handicap access off of the curbside elevation and the sidewalk elevation at the street. We found out from the Department of Public Works that there's a grant that will be developing as part of the Safe Paths to Schools, a raised walkway across the street in this particular area. We discussed, whether it could be moved to this area, but as a result of curb cuts and other streets on the opposite side, Department of Public Works and our design team felt that continuing it in this location was the best thing to do, so we're preparing for that with our design, our proposed curbside design in the entrance to the building. Yes, John?
John?
Just a quick question. On this one, I'm just a little unclear. It looks like there's parking spaces underneath. Is that like at the base of the drawing? I'm not.
Yes, I'm sorry. That's, what we've got here is we've got the proposed new conditions overlaid on the existing conditions. So the lighter lines that you see underneath
Okay.
are those existing conditions.
Okay.
Curtis?
Curtis Whitney, 43 Grandview, Watertown. Trying to understand I see the ball field, the tot lot ball, the small baseball diamond there, and the other almost kidney-shaped field behind it or next to it. And
Sure.
then a lot of walkways around all of this, as well as the wide pathway along the cemetery. Have you, I'm sure you have, but are we really maximizing the ability to get as large a play field, whether it's a running area for soccer or the tot lot, T-ball or whatever? Are you maximizing that? Can the fields be carried further down towards Warren Street? Can the building be pushed closer to the cemetery? Because it seems like there's a lot of, again, nice landscaping around, but we're talking about an elementary school where I think making sure the kids have as much possible outdoor space is paramount over nice-looking landscaping and walking corridors for the sake of having a 6-foot wide walking corridor plus landscaping on each side of it. I don't know how far along this, I can see how far along it is, but I'm wanting to make sure we take into consideration maximizing the outdoor space for the kids.
Sure. All good questions. The path that is on the backside of the building, certainly we could make that any width that was desired. It's approximately that now because there's so much traffic that travels it, but it could become slightly smaller, slightly bigger. We do want to make sure that it's got good access for snow removal, and whatever the equipment that's going to be utilized to do that has easy access to it. But we could certainly adjust the width of it. In terms of the building setback, we've moved it as close to the cemetery at this point in time as we feel that we can and still be able to make sure that we can allow, because there's quite a significant slope coming down from that property onto the school property. So to capture those slopes, and we've even got retaining walls in here, that's what these are in this location, to try to capture those slopes. But we've got it as close as we can without burying those lower level classrooms, below grade, and allow, students to be able to come out of the building and circulate to the front of the building. So we have moved it. We had it further away. We've moved it back to a place where we think that we've got just enough space for students to be able to get out and flow forward and still make up the grade. With regard to the front area of the school, we originally had this as a large green space, which it could be, meaning all of this was grass. And you could certainly make it all green space. You probably still want access to come through from the sidewalk. But interestingly enough, when we met with the faculty and administration of the school, their biggest need for elementary school use, for the daily elementary school use of the site, for outdoor play, is hard surface play, because when they described the amount of time that the grass is dry and completely appropriate for outdoor play, it's somewhat limited. So they emphasized the fact that they certainly needed outdoor green space, but they wanted as much hard surface as possible. So, for example, the shape that you described as a kidney shape here, that's a playground. That's the playground for, they divide their play into the lower grades and upper grades where they're outside at the same time, but they don't mix it to same groups. And so this is one of those playground areas, and then it flows right into a hard surface area where we've shown a basketball court lined, but essentially this is hardscape area, so that in the event that they want to allow the elementary school students to go outside and it's been raining and the conditions aren't that fantastic, sorry about that they would have that amount of area to be outside playing, because they lost a lot of that when the basketball court was taken over with the parking area. And then in describing their green space needs, it was more limited. And again, I'm just talking about the elementary school. I'm not talking about any potential after-school programs, but their green space need was more limited. And in reviewing it with them, these are the proportions that we came up with. The dotted line for an infield for T-ball is simply representing what exists in the back of the building now. And we're just sort of saying, if you did want that kind of space and we moved it to this corner of that green space, it could exist there with more outfield actually than it has over here because of the slopes. But I think the jury is still out as to whether that just becomes a striped area, or whether it becomes a skinned infield, or whether it has an actual fence of any kind around it. The building committee has discussed whether you would want a fence or you would want that sight line to be relatively open to the building. And so I think the jury's still out on the specifics of that. We're just showing it there to demonstrate that it could fit there if, in leaving that space as sort of an open green space area.
We need to move on. I think we've answered, to your previous, a few meetings ago when you were here, this wasn't enough room to do this. And so Scott moved the building back, and we've got more space here for a T-ball than we had in the previous.
My only follow-up would be to keep in mind that this is a town asset.
It is. It is. That's why that's here.
As well, so you want to make sure that we have sufficient.
But again, we also have to be considerate to the people that are using the building 5 days a week, and the professional staff is looking for this type of a design, which also will work with the community because there is a basketball court.
Can I ask a quick question?
Tom?
Oh, sorry, Tom.
Scott, you mentioned earlier down on Warren Street, handicap parking, but is there going to be some handicap spaces on the lot itself?
Yes.
Closer to where the community access to the gym? 'Cause I'm
Absolutely would have to be.
thinking for the
Yep,
voting.
absolutely would have to be, yep.
Someone else have?
Yeah, I had a quick
Oh,
question.
sorry, Kelly.
Yeah. So just really quick, I just want to point out that there may be a missed opportunity on the south side. I know that we have that retaining wall around the parking lot, but it feels like we're closing off the site that we have in the south side of that. Do you know what, Jerry, I'm talking about?
I'm not sure that I do.
So
Kelly.
south side, below the parking lot. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, right there.
That hard line's a
So I yeah, so that hard line's a retaining wall, right?
Right.
So we're basically turning our back on the whole south side of the lot. And I understand there's some severe topography there, but I'm just trying to understand why we wouldn't look at the potential to regrade and push that retaining wall back so we could capture some of that for either hardscape, playground, some actual usable site.
Yeah, it's super light, but the property line is right there, so you don't have much opportunity to make up the grade.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
All right, I didn't realize the property
yeah.
line was there.
Sorry about that. The property line's really super light on this drawing. Yeah, along with that, there's a tree line that follows that property line essentially. And for example, even over here, we're doing everything we can to keep the grading the same before it comes down to the building, so we don't lose any of those trees along that edge. And as a reminder, to the chairman's point, we did an analysis subsequent to the building committee meeting where we had this moved away from the cemetery. We moved it back, and we also demonstrated with an analysis that this proposed building leaves much more open space than the current building does today, and in fact is a larger building but leaves more open space. Now, how that open space is delineated, we consider hardscape and green space the same in terms of it's both areas are open space, but overall it's a great improvement to open space on the site. These are both the prior, just like with the Hosmer, and I'll be quick with this. In black, the borings we already have as a result of the first phase of borings. In red, the borings that will be completed this summer, so that we have adequate information for the design and construction of the foundations of the new building. We'll also be gathering some wells, some testing sites for, so we'll be doing some test pits, but also be installing some wells to determine groundwater levels, because we have to utilize this information as part of the stormwater underground infiltration system design. The floor plans for the Cuniff. And again, we've walked through these floor plans in detail, so I know that you know how they lay out. This is just demonstrating the kind of product you're going to see at the end of design development in an actual drawing, architectural drawing. The second floor of the Cuniff, third floor of the Cuniff. And the layout hasn't changed, so I'm not going to spend any time reviewing it. Exterior elevations. Same materials palette that we proposed for the Hosmer. The renderings that we presented on the Cuniff, I think, represented those materials accurately. Those are the front and back elevations. Building sections on the Cuniff. The start of development of what we refer to as exterior plan details, which just means blowing up key areas of the building plan where we've got something architecturally or structurally going on that we want to make sure the cost estimator can capture. So these drawings will all be finished to provide that information. Wall sections, very similar to the ones that we were showing on the Hosmer in terms of the information that they're trying to communicate. Our glass on the exterior of the building and starting to show sizes, configurations, orientation for all that, schedules like those we showed for the Hosmer, developing interior door details. We always want to make sure we delineate the stairs very clearly for the design development set, to make sure that we got the cost for all of those captured. And then you'll see, just like with the Hosmer, our interior elevations have more delineation on them and more detail on them, because we want to make sure that we're capturing everything that's going on. And this is not intended to be a design presentation on the interior. We'd want to do that with some renderings and some color images and some three-dimensional product.
John?
Yeah, Scott, just a
Yep.
quick, I'm back on some of the exterior elevations, just looking at this, so I didn't realize this, but part of the building is only 2 floors? Or am I not reading this right?
Which drawing are you referring to?
It goes back a ways on the exterior elevations, the west elevation? That one. What's on the bottom there? Where are we, is that looking like we're in the cemetery?
That's where the grading is coming up on the gymnasium that I was referring to. So we're on the back side of the building, and where I indicated that we'd be using the gymnasium as a retaining wall, the gym is down at this level, but the ground, the grade around it is starting to creep up around the perimeter of it. Does that make sense?
So we're standing in the cemetery?
Yes,
looking
we
at-
are.
Okay. And so the gym has no windows on this side, or no, is that correct?
Only up higher.
We're up higher.
Well, for example, this is the upper section of the gym,
But the
because it's
gym
a
is-
two-story volume.
The gym is two levels.
Correct.
I see. Okay. All right, thank you.
Kelly? Sorry, Leo?
So this is a question for the chair. I just want to make sure that the public is aware. This is the design development phase that Scott is in currently, right? And he's talking about completing this phase within 7 weeks. Is that correct?
That's what he said.
That is correct. End of July, that is correct.
End of July for both of these buildings. And I guess the point is that essentially you're contracted to design the building during this period. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Right, so we're looking, I saw on the agenda that the point of this meeting was to go through these design reviews, which we're doing, right? So I guess I want to make sure that when you cross over into the construction documents phase, which I assume is coming next, and you'll probably go right into it if this committee allows you to, you're essentially not designing any further after 7 weeks from now, once you deliver this design development set, correct?
I would say we're not redesigning. We're continuing to design more detail into
Sure,
certain
get
areas.
more specific.
Right.
I don't want to put words in your mouth,
Sure.
but you're digging into developing what we see here on the page, right?
That is correct.
Okay. I just have a general comment that I think we need to really be aware of the materials that Scott is talking about on both of these buildings, and we really need to think about it and discuss as a committee whether we want to move in this particular direction.
I'll work with Scott to do a presentation, and we'll bring samples as well.
Great.
As some developers do when they come to planning and zoning, and we can have a discussion. We'll have a meeting about the exterior finishes. Does that,
Yeah,
is that similar to what you're looking for?
I think the public should be made aware of the materiality that we're talking about, and that would suffice, correct? Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And at some point, we'll decide yes or no which way we want to go. That would be,
I guess my point is that time is waning, right? And from what I can tell, I think generally the Cunniff language, the hierarchy of the volumes and the spaces is a little bit more legible than the Hosmer, certainly, and you got my comment before. But really, my urgency is about the amount of time that we have left in this phase and the advancement that I think could be made in that time period.
well, unfortunately, this is one of the first times that someone's raising their hand in the direction of where we've been going. The rest of the committee has been comfortable to this point. this evening you're raising your hand, we're going to try to address it. But again, the committee, up until this point, have been very comfortable with the presentations that Scott has made, so we will try to address your concerns as we move forward. But if nobody's going to raise their hand, and everybody was comfortable to this point. So that's why we're where we are.
Yeah, it's been unfortunate that over the past few months, the committee meetings were on days that I was committed to other business, so.
I understand.
That's the reason that I haven't been able to attend
I
and raise
understand.
my hand in advance, but, so I apologize to the committee for that.
Kelly?
Yeah, so just a recommendation for moving forward, because, I share a lot of what Leo is saying, because obviously I want us to get to the end of DD, but I also don't want to get to the end of DD with a lot of people who have questions about the design. So I don't know if it would be possible to have a design subcommittee for these next 7 weeks so that we can start diving into it. I don't want to waste people's times who don't have the kind of questions that Leo and I have, and I know there's other people in the community, architects included, who might have input. Because right now, we're a very small group in this room, and there's a lot of people out there who are going to have opinions about these schools. Right now, we've got 2 schools that look very close to one another.
If all those people had opinions, they'd be in the audience.
Yeah, well, a lot of them are
Unfortunately, I
young
haven't seen.
parents. I mean,
Unfortunately, I haven't seen
yeah.
any of them. And I'm not trying to
Yeah.
minimize their opinion, but if you have an opinion, these are open public meetings. We've been meeting for a year and a half.
Yep.
We've been meeting sometimes 4 times a month. These are very public meetings. They're publicized. We announced
Okay.
at least 2
Yep.
meetings in advance. So
Understood.
I'm gonna be a little bit harsh on that because of the fact that we have the people from the energy group that have come to every single one of our meetings. They had something to say.
I understand. I can
So-
also tell you that a lot of the parents, believe it or not, have obligations in the evenings during the week with their children, and we're
I
making a
understand.
tremendous amount of sacrifices. So I understand, and I'm not telling us to redesign. I'm just saying that, it's hard to sit here and look at these review drawings. We can barely, read them. And I'd like to be able to make comments. In the agenda, it says design review, does it not? I'd like to have an actual design review. So I think it's okay that we can make these comments and have these opinions, because the last thing I want is for us to keep nodding our heads for the next 7 weeks, and then, we're done.
John?
Just so we're meeting again in 2 weeks, correct?
Yes, but half of that meeting is going to be MSBA.
On the high school?
Yes.
Okay. But, so maybe we need to look at either a longer meeting, or, you were talking about materials. So that would, to have actual materials here, I don't know whether Scott was planning that or not, but.
We can make sure he plans that.
Right. But, maybe that's a meeting where we have a little bit longer than 2 hours in order to provide that opportunity. Because if we don't do it then, and we don't meet again until towards the end of July, then it's going to be done, right?
Again, questions are being raised this evening that have not been raised to this point.
Right,
Correct?
but
So I just, as trying to manage these meetings, if every time we've had a meeting, questions were addressed, they've been addressed. Tonight, we have new questions, so we're going to figure out how to address them. We also have a group of people that says, I can't meet on this night, I
Right,
can't
right.
meet on that night,
Right.
we don't have meeting space. It's a very big challenge for a lot of us.
And we also spent several weeks trying to find an OPM, which
Yes.
our focus was not on design.
Yes.
So, yes.
But,
I'm going to just, hold on,
okay.
one person at a time. Vinnie?
I do think the choice of materials on the exterior of the buildings is a major decision point. And I know the AI3 has spent a lot of time and is considering specific materials from specific vendors. And I was just wondering if, maybe that could be sent to us ahead of time, like within the next couple of days, we can actually have time to review it ourselves, sort of the range of options with either the metal cladding, whether the composite board, whether the stonework. Not the specific thing, but here's like 5 or 6 different types of stone we're considering for the lower course. Here's 4 or 5 different metal panel materials. Here's 4 or 5 different composite board materials, just so those of us who are interested in it from a technical standpoint can actually investigate and look at it, and then when we have the next meeting, we can actually come with much more specific questions rather than just, in 2 hours trying to do all that, because I understand it takes, you can spend a long time looking at manufacturer's data sheet to make sure we get the product that we want, the end result that we want. So maybe that makes sense? Just throwing that out
Scott
there.
and I will have a discussion about how we're going to move this forward. The issue has been raised, the issue has been heard, and we'll find a way to do this. If we have to call a meeting 4 nights a week, and whoever shows up, we're going to do that. You know me, I'll come here as many times as I can. First, Anne Marie, and then Elodia.
Marie Clunin, Winthrop Street. Just want to acknowledge a couple of things and make a statement, if I may. The materials are a big question. Maureen had a question about it. To be able to research them in advance and find out the historic. But I've very quickly learned that you have to be invested in this process. Thank you to all of you. And Angie sent out an email to all the East Enders. There have been participation from people that come all the time. We come on a regular basis, and we're invested in making sure that our neighborhood that we live in has a quality component. The only time I've seen people from the school is when you have it at the school and they drop their opinions and then they walk out, but they don't come to these meetings and share in how we better our community. So, Kelly, you have some great comments about the building and the awnings and that whole piece, but I'm sorry, I agree. Like, they've bent over backwards to let people come to this meeting or have it different places, and it hasn't brought the audience. So I don't know that it's quality to hold anything up. So thank you.
Elodia.
Elodia Thomas, 67 Marion Road. I want to echo what Anne Marie said and what Marcus said. I have sat through numerous development meetings in town. I've seen them bring in materials so that we can see what's going on with various buildings. So that has happened. But honest to God, these meetings are filmed, so anybody can watch them on video. There is a concern right now that I did get marked that the presentations haven't been put on the school website since March 6th. Everything is missing since March 6th in terms of Scott's handouts, and somebody complained that it wasn't right front and center how to get to Building for the Future. You have to click the red menu button to go to another button, to go to another button. They said, why isn't it just in the front? It's the biggest thing. We're spending $170 million. So I do validate that. I think it's important that it should be front and center. But given that I go to a lot of meetings in this town around development issues and green space issues and everything, I do lose my patience, Kelly, with that idea that everybody is so busy, because I'm busy too, and I don't even have kids in the system. I don't have any children, but I am so committed to this project.
All right, let's not, we're going to, Scott, let's move on until you can finish your presentation. We'll have questions afterwards.
Just with the kind of, again, that design development set is going to be representative of a lot more detail on the interior spaces and blowing those up, and we're demonstrating what some of those things will look like. I would emphasize that tonight was not intended to be a rollout of the design of the buildings. It was intended to be a rollout of the content of the design development set. We dedicated a couple of other meetings to a discussion around colored, very photorealistic imagery on materials, et cetera. So I don't want anybody to get the impression we were trying to make this, it was more of a design update on the design development set, but we did dedicate some other meetings to actually presenting more information around that in terms of materials, finishes, aesthetics, and those kinds of things.
John, you had a question?
Well, I'm sorry, I was just going to make two comments. One, on the website, so I'll do what I can to see if we can get that up to date. I don't want to make excuses here, but without an OPM, that's one of the problems.
No, I know that was a hiccup, and I said
And then,
the hiccup was-
right, and then we actually lost somebody in the central office at the school department as well, so that didn't help, so, but we need to do that. And the other comment, I just, briefly, I don't want to belabor the point here, but I think this presentation has gone to a level of detail that we haven't quite gone to before in terms of looking at the exterior in particular. So I think the points that have been raised, I understand those, and we haven't focused as much on the outside materials. This is really the first time that I think you've had that detail like that. And so, for people to raise questions about that are coming, I think that's fine, and it sounds like that one of the next stages will be to look at that material, and physically, if we can do that, that would be great, and kind of make that next step. So I think we can move along. Sorry.
Any other questions or comments on this section?
No.
Yes, Kelly?
So just going back to schedule, so if we have 7 weeks left and there's some concerns, and I know everyone has opinions about that, but are we going to put together a milestone schedule then that's going to get us to 100% DD so that we know what to expect when? So say we're going to talk about exterior and exterior materials, just it'd be good to know when that's going to be, just as we get closer to DD so that we don't wait till 100% DD and then we have more comments.
I think that would depend on the meetings that the building committee has between now and that target. And certainly we work for this building committee. If we need to take a pause to work in anything that the building committee wants to in terms of reviews or analysis, that will be up to this building committee.
And I'll be working with the owner's project manager, who's going to help us as we move forward.
I would recommend a design subcommittee because we haven't even talked about interiors really yet. So there's still so much to discuss, and there's really not a lot of time until you guys are in CDs. So I think that would be my recommendation.
Okay. Anyone else? Anything else, Scott?
That's all for us tonight. Thank you.
Sustainability, Leo.
Sorry, I just had one thing. I hope there's no misunderstanding. We are trying to help this process. We're not trying to design by committee. And the point is to really start to hone in on how to best project a public image here in Watertown that we can be proud of, right? So I know in general there's been a lot of meetings and some materiality discussion and other things, but the thing is we're really all on the same page and really trying to achieve the same thing. There is 90% of these buildings that I agree with, 95%. I don't have any issues with the program adjacencies, with the way that the operations is running, all of these site orientation things. I think what we're requesting is some modest, reasonable opportunities for feedback sessions.
As I said earlier, this is the first time this has been raised.
Great.
We will address it,
Yep, I hear you. Thank you.
okay? You have my word that we will address it, as I've given my word to many people in this room before, and we do address them. Sustainability Committee update.
So we met Steve Magoon and Lloyd Cable and Scott and some of his staff met at 5 o'clock just before this meeting. We spent a good period of time talking about the kind of photovoltaic options, particularly at the Cuniff and the Hosmer, but then also a question was raised as to whether that would make sense at the Lowell. And we had a good discussion about that. And then I think we also talked about kind of net zero at the Cuniff and the Hosmer and kind of what that means, what the definition for net zero is. I think it's a little bit early. Scott made references today also this evening about the kind of energy modeling, and that's at somewhat of an early stage, but we talked about the challenges of trying to achieve net zero. And then we got to our last agenda item, which I apologize, I didn't budget quite enough time, was to create some draft goals, sustainability goals that could come to the building committee. And we had some discussion about that, but we didn't quite finish it. So I'll have some conversations with you, Mr. Chairman, and Scott, and the committee, because we may need to meet perhaps next week. It doesn't have to be a terribly long meeting, but if we want to forward something to a meeting that's already getting kind of long, but the next meeting in 2 weeks, that, I've talked with Scott, but I think that would be the timeliness. Otherwise, we're getting awfully late in terms of this committee approving, kind of signing on to some sustainability goals. But that's still our goal, is to get a document to the full building committee that they can look at, can be explained, and that they can edit and approve.
Okay. Thank you for the update. We've already done the next two. High school update. Dee Dee and I had a little email discussion today. There really is nothing to report other than the fact that we've been working with an owner's project manager who will be at our next building committee meeting to do a presentation on the next step that's required to move the high school project forward. Next meeting will be 2 weeks from tonight, June 19th. We have a meeting tentatively scheduled, not tentatively, we finally got a room today for July 24th in the lecture hall. But it appears that we'll be having more meetings, depending on where I can find a room. We will probably have a couple extra ones, so please keep that in mind.
July 20, in the lecture hall at the high school?
Yes. we
On the
couldn't get-
24th?
On the 24th of July, because we could not get this room.
Okay.
Any member of the public wish to make any more comments or questions? Seeing none, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you.